Welcome everybody to the Campfire Project. Today we've been having a bit of a chat in advance, but we've been waiting for our fourth party to come along, because one thing I've been loving about the chats is that we've been talking to men from all over the world. The other day it was London, it was America and Australia together. Today it was going to be London again, Australia and also India. But due to technical problems, we're down to just the three of us on the screen. But we've been talking a little bit about this while we've been waiting for our other panellists to join us. And we were looking at why boys don't cry, but men do as a subject. And we've been having a little bit of a chat about this. And what I'd love to do is to throw it over to, first of all, to Kenny to introduce what he was talking about with boys don't cry, but men do.
Hello. Do you know, the first thing that crossed my mind as I was listening to your intro is when I was seven years old, and it was after having dinner. I was in Africa with my parents, my aunt and uncle, and there was a lot of trouble going on, Idi Amin and all that kind of stuff. We had our phones tapped, we were followed, it was seriously not safe. And the phone rang and someone said to my father, "We're going to come and kill you tonight." And he just thought, that's a cheap, nasty joke. Had a joke back. He said something like, "We've got 4 lions, so you'd need to fight them first." We had 4 Alsatians. It was normal to have Alsatian guard dogs. So then they phoned back after he put the phone down. It was a bit strange. It was silent for a minute, and the adults were like, "What's going on?" And then they had the decency to phone back and say, "We're not kidding. We're going to come and kill you tonight." And everyone was stunned. And for a lot of my life, I felt like I let myself down as a 7-year-old boy by crying. I cried, and I didn't usually cry. And it was just normal to not cry, to hold it together. It's not even to not be a problem or anything, but it's like to not be weak, to not have anything wrong, to have a good front, to be a good boy, to not be a sissy. And I don't remember any teasing or anything like that. It was a very different society, community over there. But how weird that I felt like I let myself down, but with something so important. And then I've noticed how boys don't cry, and how boys compete, and how boys need to show how masculine they are, and how soft and how heartbroken a boy can be if his best friend gets a new best friend, or he's ignored in the playground. It's like boys are so vulnerable with such big open hearts. Meanwhile, it seems like there's no space for this. It's like you have to do the rough and tumble and be okay. And then I remember few years ago now, I was interviewed for a BBC 3 documentary, and the producer, pretty girl, knew how to connect with me, and she took me very quickly in the conversation to a place that she tipped me over. Basically, I think we were talking about the same situation, and she asked how it felt, and she asked how my life was after that, being a little boy pretending to be a man. And it feels like that was the first time that I allowed myself to feel some of it. And the crying was almost like an overflow of, and I think this is most of my crying these days, is when my heart opens, whatever debris was in the way leaks out through my eyes, if that makes sense. And since then, I feel like I'm open to crying. Because I'm open and I'm alive, where before I was closed to so much, and I was a surviving boy. And I think irrespective of situations, most of my clients went to boarding school, and a lot of people think that's a lot of privilege, but they are turned into surviving boys who are distracted by busyness, who are taught not to feel. And I guess this is where the English stiff upper lip comes in. And to get busy, and to get smart, and and a lot of them do very well out of it. Some of them don't do that well. But boys can so easily be humiliated, or be abandoned, or be ridiculed when they cry. And a lot of people just don't know how to respond to a boy or a man crying. So yeah, it's like emotions through the ages and the development of the male.
And as you were saying before about the, when we were chatting earlier, about the wall that we put in front of our heart, and it's actually breaking through that in a constructive way.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
be able to express it. So there's a lot of pressure put on all our, well, on all of us as young fellas, and again, something that we carry into later life.
And you know, it's almost like society says men have walls, should break down, have to communicate, open up, blah, blah, blah. And that's all well and good. But I don't believe that any of that would be a good idea unless the man is held or safe or in a community that doesn't expect anything from him, doesn't need him to be anyone in particular. And that's one of the functions of the men's groups, is when a man is ready and saying, right, I've had enough of this thinking, surviving, holding it together and putting on a good front. And then it's like, fine, because the closed groups also have WhatsApp groups. So it's fine. If you're going in, that's great. Keep in touch with this. Don't isolate. Let it come up. Let us know what you're feeling. Let us know what you're remembering. Let us know what you're thinking. Because before I went in, I would not cry. I would not even open up and talk too much, because I felt that if I start talking and thinking and remembering, I'd probably get overwhelmed and go mad. And the picture for years was like in a white jacket, rocking in the corner with loads going on in my head, but none of it coming out into the world. And with crying, I really thought that if I start, I may never stop, and then I'll be a basket case for good. And I think stepping into this part of who I am, or what I've bricked over in order to survive, breaking through the bricks can be dangerous. Who knows what's lurking under that?
As you say, it's got to be set up nice and safe for them. That's why the campfire was all about creating a safe environment so the men could give themselves permission to tell their stories. And for us to be held accountable as a community to do just that for them. And so that they feel open to be able to express themselves. How have you found it, Jerome?
Yeah, thanks, Alan, for having me back on the panel, and as always, doing a great job. And it's a really interesting subject, and we're talking about, you know, the boy doesn't cry, but the man does, and it's really interesting. And I think, you know, one of the things I'm always saying to you, if you really, really want to have a great life, you have to be able to build the muscle to fully express yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And I think whether it's men or women, I think some of us really struggle to express ourselves in those areas. You know, some of us struggle to live with a sense of purpose. A lot of us do. Some of us struggle to express ourselves physically because we feel maybe physically inadequate. And some of us struggle educational wise. So we play it down, and emotionally as well. And yeah, and crying is a massive emotion. And going back to what Kenny said, I think I've always struggled to cry. My father, who brought me up, was a military man, and you know, he always wanted to sort of toughen me up. But my mum always protected me from his way of wanting to bring me up as a man. And in some ways, I suffered, because I think if my mum let me off the lead a bit, I probably would have been tougher a lot quicker than I became in life. So I'm really cotton being a sport boy. And so I see this a lot from the flip side as well, that what stops people in business, and because I'm a business performance specialist, what stops people in business is being able to make a mistake and brush it off very quickly. So they don't take action because of the fear of making a mistake. And so they haven't got the ability to laugh at themselves and take themselves lightly. And I think when it comes back to crying, it's another self-defense mechanism to not show vulnerability or to feel ashamed that we seem weak. You know, as men, women will cry a lot easier. Well, a majority of women will cry a lot easier, depending on the role they're playing in society. So a lot of high-level CEO women in their masculine energy will probably struggle to cry more than maybe the mother at home who's who's nurturing her children and feels pain for her children. So there's different demographics where we talk about the masculine and feminine energy. It doesn't necessarily mean gender specific. But I've always struggled to cry. I've got a built-in mechanism not to cry. And I don't feel like I'm missing out on it. But as we have these discussions and you talk about expressing yourself, I think there's areas where we can build muscles in, drop that wall and become more vulnerable in showing off, especially to our close ones, to the people we love, and dropping that wall, maybe not to the public so much. But it's amazing when you drop your guard when you're doing workshops and you speak from the heart, it's amazing how you connect with the audience more.
That's it. Yeah, that's a beautiful part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing I love about it. When you actually connect at that level, you feel freer when you're doing it as well. So it's a shock to us to act, we hold it back for all that time. And then all of a sudden we're in a situation with, why didn't I let this out before? Because we're around people and it just feels so good to be able to connect on that emotional level with people.
I think that a lot of this is environmental, that there needs to be the right space for any person, male or female, masculine or feminine, to open up. And I agree with you, Jerome. It's not about male or female. It is all about the masculine and feminine sides. And I work with masculine women who just cannot be emotional. They don't feel, and they're so hard-hitting, it's outrageous. And it's balancing the two. And very often in couples, even in business partners, there's the masculine one and there's the feminine one. And they both need to generally share, rather than be at loggerheads, being right, or punishing the other one for not having what they've got. And it's hilarious how initially it's great, I do this and you do that, and it's great, and how perfect and balanced we are one. No, you're not. You're actually two halves and it's not functioning, and within time you'll punish each other for what the other one's not doing. But there's a funny one environmentally. I realized that a lot of men actually want to talk and want to cry, but they have very, very little space to be able to do that. And I also find in a lot of the men's workshops, some of them can be a little bit too strong with the warrior, because they're continuing with their boy stuff. So it's all do, and there's not enough be, or feel, or listen, or be together, or connect. It doesn't include enough of the feminine, therefore it feels like the immature masculine. And one of the most important things that I feel we do at Men Facilitate is train people how to listen, how to hold a space so people can talk and cry and say quite disturbing things, very vulnerable things, and it's held. Because I remember as a little boy being the Golden Mummy's boy, there were very few boundaries for most of my life with women. I didn't know that there was such a thing, or I was allowed them, or I was responsible for their emotions, or whatever it was. And it took a lot for me to learn to have these boundaries. Meanwhile, in relationship, women could come very close very quickly, and then suddenly it would be a little bit too close and there'd be a trigger, as if I'm going to be smothered. So then I'd push away, or rather than pushing away, I would go for abandonment. So they're responsible for breaking it and not me, and I'm not the bad boy. So on one extreme, there was that smothering, and that's a throwback from my past. And then something happened, I think it must have been 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, with my best friend, who's this big, burly, like he's got muscles on muscles. He trains the A-listers as a model, all that kind of stuff. And he was going through absolute shit. He couldn't sleep. He lost weight. He lost muscle. He was depressed. He was in limbo. It was terrible. And I stayed over one night. He was proper insomniac. And at some stage, enough healing, and he was he was one of a twin and in an incubator and not well for a while. So he's not very good to be touched. Some people, it's just like touching's an issue for whatever reason. All the same, I said, lie on the city. I'm going to give you some healing. And I knew what I was doing. And it was just very gently, you could say it's like the Reiki moves or whatever, but just, I remember holding his head and staying there. And he told me probably months later that while I was there, he was praying to God that I don't move because he needed this so much. He just needed to be held and safe and to have that contact. And I knew he was crying. He knew he was crying. He pretended not to cry, and he was sobbing for about half an hour. But, you know, letting it pour without making a noise and trying not to be found out. And I was just giving him his space to do it however he wanted to do it, as long as he's getting, as you know, we were talking earlier on about the way that emotions pass. And when I've worked with suicidal people, it's like, this is going to pass. It's like here and now, it's driving you bonkers in your head. The emotions might be dead, but this will pass. And it was the same with him. It was up, it was being met. And it just, he needed to have that connection to break the spell of I'm on my own and this may never pass. And it was allowed to pass. But being as close as we are, and not even making eye contact or seeing each other and still pretending not to, well, in a way you could say it's silly. In another way, it's how cool to create those boundaries and to have the environment where we don't need to make a process or a drama or anything about us about it. It's natural emotions needing to be met and passed, because unless they're met, I feel they strengthen that wall between in front of the heart. Just being met is so powerful in that place.
Yeah. When I look at the emotions, I'm thinking you're talking to men, they're worried about, you know, emotions are sissy or whatever. But you think about it like lifting weights. You can lift so much weight, but when you put that last extra weight on, you can no longer lift the bar. And that's virtually what the emotions are like. We know that every thought that we've had, every emotion we've got, if we don't deal with it, it's stored in the body. So they're built up. It's like that barbell. We keep whacking more weights onto it. It's going to get to a stage where if it ever shifts, we're not going to be able to handle it. And all of a sudden we get into a situation where the emotions start to come out, and virtually they're chemicals. They go straight back through the blood supply. Next thing you know, your brain gets whack. This onslaught of all these different emotions that have been stored up over time. Nobody could do that. If you just turned around and got that barbell and dropped it on them, they wouldn't be able to hold it. So think about it from a masculine, you know, from a physical point of view. That's the emotional variation of. That's the emotional equivalent. You're trying to hang on to too much weight, and every one of those emotions will hit your brain, and all of a sudden, no wonder you can't think straight, because you've got all these emotions over all this time hitting you at the one time. And how do you deal with that? Yeah. You just can't carry it.
That is so important.
It's interesting, Alan. I was reading some stats from Black Dog, and I think men are 76% commit suicide. Out of the men are the ones that commit suicide. 76% of men. And you know, as we're having this discussion, and one of them says no. In one of the lines, it says no one really knows why. And suicide rate is more people die from suicide in Australia than cancer. And that astounded me when I read those stats. And this is crazy. And so as we're having this discussion, and as you're describing the weights there, Alan, I'm thinking, this is really it, isn't it? If we don't let things, I know you talked about holding it, Kenny, but I think it's about letting it out. I think it's about...
Oh, no. What I ment is holding the person. So to let it out and let it flow.
So it's about, thanks for that, Kenny. It's about letting it out, but we don't do that as men, do we? We actually...
Yes, we do. Some do more than others.
Yeah, I mean, some cases it comes out wrong.
And I think it depends on the environment you're in. At school, if you're growing up at school, and I remember being bullied for the first time at school, and luckily enough, I had a father who, and I talk about this in my workshops, who coached me through that period, and I came out the other side really, really well. It's like, I don't believe in forgiveness. I actually don't believe in forgiveness. I believe in gratitude. I'm so grateful that I got bullied, because it was my time then to build a great relationship with my father, who coached me through that period. And that's why I got into coaching, who coached me through that period and realized that everything was in my power to have what I wanted. And it was about the pack sorting itself out. And I was taking it personally. And I remember going home that night and trying to make myself white, and I was scrubbing myself in the bath. And I talk about this in my workshops. And I'm so grateful for that incident because it allowed me to step up and move up the pack within the school playground in that first year. And my dad said, all it is the pack working itself out. And and one of the negative things he said, it goes, you're not equipped to be an alpha. Yeah. And that's why one of my things is running the alpha, because you can grow into an alpha position. But he goes, you don't want to be the runt of the litter either. And so having that awareness, being coached by someone who's ex-military, who's a pathfinder in pack mentality, because he was trained in warfare, armed and unarmed combat. He coached me through that period, which was a lovely experience to become close to my father for really the only time in my life, but also come out the other end and go, shit, you are in charge of your destiny. And those incidents,
one of the most important things you said there for me is about the whole issue of power. And I feel that when men reconnect with ourselves, including the emotions, including the shadow, the denied, the depressed, whatever, then that part is no longer running us, stealing our energy, stealing our power. It's like all those no-go areas suddenly open up. But by letting go of this tension of holding, surviving, pretending, frauding, whatever it is, letting go of that just opens oceans of power to flow in. It's ridiculous. Then the man is more available initially to himself and then to everyone else. But I don't believe I can meet the world any more than I can meet myself. And I don't believe that anyone in the world will treat me in a way unless I'm treating myself in that way. So that is an awful lot of power. And there is power beyond all of, survival is survival. It's just kind of in a panic up here. But beyond survival, the depth of vulnerability and power and possibility is absolutely phenomenal. So it's just like, it's a lot of, and it's personal power rather than power over anyone or anything.
Exactly.
As a mature male, I can share that power rather than needing to crumble someone with that power or avoid being crumbled by that power. And again, that for me is the difference between boys and men. Is like the collaboration rather than the competition. It's like, we've survived. Now let's create. We're safe. We don't need to be our own or each other's enemy. So let's
you take that power over yourself, and then you can have influence with other people. So it's not a matter of controlling them. It's a matter of stepping into your own power. Realise that you're not at war with them. You're not trying to be the man. You're actually a man, the same as everybody else. But in your own right, we're all uniquely different to each other. But the great thing is, as you said, Jerome, it was about the lessons that you learned, but how you chose to learn those and how you then chose to move forward from that. Everything comes down to a choice. How do we decide it either controls us or we control it? So it's like, if I'm helping people to understand their own profiles, it's about them taking dominion over their personality, not letting their personality control them. And that's a wonderful place to be. But you've got to make it a safe place for men to be able to do that, especially when they're carrying such a heavy weight to start with. It's like your friend, as you said, Kenny, that all it took was you to cradle his head. He was at that point, and that was enough to tip him over to where his emotions, he couldn't hold him down anymore. But that meant that you had to create that safe place for him to be able to do that. So that was your responsibility. So that he can then give himself permission to actually cry and let it out. But in that, the connection, tell me whether I'm right or wrong, the connection between the two of you would have been so much stronger because of the fact that he was able to open up, and secondly, that you were able to provide that space for him.
Do you know, this is such an important thing you bring up, and it's a subtle little thing that another fear I had before crying, while I was still surviving, is if I cry and you see me, then do we have a different relationship? Do we have to be best friends? Do I have to be nice to you forever because I've met you at this secret, sacred place? Where what I love about what's going on around me in my life, I believe in the world, maybe it's just in my bubble, is love is unconditional. It's not, we have been through this, we have done this, you know my secrets, therefore we're best friends and it's you and me against the world. It's more, you're free, I'm free, me being with me and therefore able to be with you is free, and it's for the good of all of us. It's love-based rather than fear-based, and it's not exclusive. And I love how it's not exclusive, because my old world was very much, if someone has, you know, whatever it is that you've done together, you've been through some tragedy, or you've been in some like fierce sports game, or you've told secrets, or you've cried, or they know whatever it is, then it's almost like a pact and an exclusive relationship. And for me, it's not about that. It's, for me, so much more unconditional. And then there's enough for everyone. And everyone's allowed their favorite people. And these favorite people are also allowed to pass. It's not, we have a pact forever. It's right here and right now, because I'm with you and I choose to be with you. I love you the most in the world. Did you just get that I just told you too that I love you? Anyway, let's move on.
Good stuff.
I think I wrote down 3 things that came up that we've mentioned, and it's really interesting because this conversation is about men, and I wouldn't have got through that period in my life without a mentor. So my dad coached me, but he mentored me, and I think, where are the men around us that cry? So it's all right to say men should cry, but we know men learn through watching and doing, rather than communicating. So the mentors, I didn't see my dad cry. Never saw him cry. He always had a tough exterior, and I suppose that was coming from the military. So we're not learning that from other men. The other thing that came up is, you said, Kenny, that love is unconditional, and it is. But men aren't driven by love; they're driven by respect in the pack. If you look at a sporting team, they want to be respected for their capabilities and skills. You know, they don't want to be the kid lining up against the wall going, "Oh, you know what? We'll pick you because you're just lovely. We just love you." And there's a deep desire going, "I want to earn my corner in this team. I want to be respected for my capabilities and skills. I want to be, you're a really good player, or you're really good at this. You're a really good leader. You bring the team together." We want to feel like we're contributing. And so we're driven, and respect is earned. Respect is earned. Love is unconditional, because I can love my kids sometimes. It doesn't mean I always respect them.
I think you're so spot on with that. And for me, the love part is from the being. And the respect part, especially in the field, whether it's the sports field or the business field or whatever it is, that's for the doing. And that's where it's the best man for the job. And also for a good man to know when to score or when to pass the ball, when to step up or when to step down. And that's being a man, that's the collaboration. So I totally agree. And there's the being and there's the doing. And with the where are the men, that's a really important question. And I believe that as I've changed as a man, I attract different people and situations to me. I find it important enough to create community of men who are alive and able and will pass it on. And even as private clients, I attract a lot of, therapists as well as coaches and everything else. People who I know will not just live a good life themselves, but I tend to attract the men that will pass it on. And I work with a lot of trainers of sports people or sports teams. And when they get it and they start meeting the depth in themselves and they tap into their power, then they're a lot more efficient in the field and they can pass it on in their teams. And I do feel that the more a person knows himself, is himself, feels himself, and has that power, the better he is on the field. I don't know much about sports, but I do write about it sometimes, and now I Google and find out. So there was an incident where the England captain, I don't remember his name now, begins with an S, basically put his arms around the guy who missed the penalty, and the guy who missed the penalty was crying. And there was a big hoo-ha in the media. I was asked to write it a couple of times about, is it good that it's feminine men, or where's the toxic, and is there a place for toxic, and would men be better if they weren't emotional on the field, etc., etc. And what I said is, there is a time and a place. There is a time to be toxic, and that's when you're kicking that ball so hard that the whole world will shift aside, because that goal is the only goal, and that's what's going to happen. That's not the time to go, oh my God, the ball's coming my way. I need to take some deep breaths, and I need to center myself before I choose how to respond to the ball. You know, there's no time and space for that. It's time to be a vicious animal sometimes. There's a time and a place.
We look at it, we know
am
that...
I disappearing, Alan? Alan, am I disappearing?
You're going a bit dark.
You
I'm going to put
are.
the light on.
Right.
On, let me just put the light on.
I was going to say, the way you were going there, Jerome, you disappear completely in a moment. As I've said to you many times, you know, at night time, I'm looking for your teeth. This is what I love about it. You know, forget about political correctness. When you're able to talk to a man and just joke about things, and it's, you know, give each other heaps in both directions, which is what I really love about it. Because if you can't joke and laugh, then you can't, you're holding everything down. You're just going to get angrier. So one way to actually get to being able to let the tears and everything else out is to allow the pressure to come off a little bit and just go into a bit of laughter and joke about something. Right now, this is why I've got some really good mates, and all we do is, one in particular I get together with most Saturday mornings for a coffee, and we just bag each other. We have a great time. And his partner sits back and she watches what's going on, just shakes her head. She goes, oh, leave you guys to it. But it's a connection that we have, and it allows us to actually get rid of some of the pressure we've got, first of all. And in that safe environment, we're also able to pick up which men around us are ones that we can go a little bit further with then and go more into our emotions. So I can actually test my way to find a safe environment when I haven't already had it set up for me. You know?
It's, I love what you say, because you're talking about the different levels and stages of it. And I find it, to be frank, really boring when I'm in a men's group, and the purpose of that group is everyone has to do emotions and come up with sob stories, and whoever's got the best sob stories and sniffles a bit's going to be the most powerful and the most glorified and the most popular. And then there are the ones where you do and you talk about the tough stuff, and you know, and it's just competitive in different ways. Where for me, it's really important that whatever the men in the room are carrying has space to come up. And if it's taking the piss, if it's really getting into something nasty, then getting into it and sitting with it. And once it's been met, then let the gear change into hilarious laughter if there's something funny or something personal or something stupid, whatever it is. But for me, there needs to be space for all of it. And it sounds like this is what you've got with your friends, where if it's, like we were saying earlier, if it's all warrior, then it's like, take it back to the scout hut. We've moved on, and include it, but we've moved on. That's not all there is to it.
And that's it. Well, it's shifting those emotions. Sorry, go on, Jerome.
No, I was going to say, we spoke a bit about respect, and we spoke a bit about the mentor. And, you know, we don't go back to like men crying and emotions. It's like we're talking about, you know, men not opening up and speaking as well. And then speaking can lead to crying. And it's, when we look at men's suicide, it's such a, and I live on the northern beaches here, and it's very, very high and prevalent on the northern beaches. It's young men committing suicide. And the other thing, and you spoke about it earlier, Kenny, and you did as well, Alan, is environment. And it's so powerful, the home. I think when you're out in the outside world and you're doing your thing and you're working and or you're playing sport or you're doing hobbies, but where you come home, it really should be that place where you rejuvenate. And if that's a toxic place in the intimate relationship, whether it's a heterosexual relationship or a gay relationship, if it's toxic and you cannot really be vulnerable with your partner, how do you fill your cup up to go back into the world and you know, face the challenges that you do every day in business? And that's really, I think, when we look at suicide, where does a man go if he's not with the ideal partner to actually be vulnerable and cry with his partner, and his partner can hold that space? We then find it really difficult. Where do we go? Where do we go from there? We're not going to go back into the outside world and front it, because we've got to put on a different face. And that's really that's really understanding that from a man committing suicide. You know, you need a place where he's understanding.
I love that you've brought up the whole issue of coming home to be safe and to rejuvenate and all of that. I think it's fundamentally important, especially if there are kids around for some reason. Maybe it shouldn't be, especially when there are kids around. Maybe it should be always. It's so important. And where I go is I have my wife and I love the relationship. I have two best friends and we spend more time chatting on the phone than we do with each other, because one now lives in America. And then there's the guy here, and we work hard. But it's nice to fill the gaps and to just keep up with what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what's going on, and how stupid certain things are. It's just debriefing. And that's a zone that belongs to me. That's male. And they know me inside out. And everything is accepted. And we'll tell each other when we're acting like tossers, and we'll praise each other when we're doing well, and we're totally met and accepted. And then comes the groups. And in all of these places, I can be more and more of myself, practice being myself. And the more it's normal for me to be my raw, authentic self with these many people, and I'm blessed that I've got so many, the more that I can live it in the world, and the more that they live it in the world, and that's how it works. But what I've noticed from the bigger picture of my fantasy of the way that life works is sometimes it's not about things being happy at home or anywhere. Sometimes it's more, my fantasy is life says, okay, here's some crap that you've bricked over. Now, this is an opportunity for you to know the crap, so the crap doesn't own you anymore. And once you've known this crap, it doesn't mean you have to suppress it or survive it or fix it or anything. Just be with it. Then it doesn't own you anymore, and then we'll give you more life. And I would say with my closest friends, my wife, the people I love the most, definitely they're the people that I allow to hurt me the most, and possibly the people that I cause most pain to. We know that we're not just going to abandon and escape. We're going to stay and go through the pain and go through the hate and go through the projections and go through everything else that life brings up. And there are times where my wife and I will go through, whether it's her or my crap or both our crap, because we need to go through this, and it's not personal. The drama in hand, for me, is just the drama in hand. And the way that I make the most use of it is when I'm in that feeling, I remember to not be distracted by the drama and try and fix or avoid it, but to follow the feeling. And in a breath or two, I'm back at the scene of the crime. And that's the source of the crap that needs releasing, so I can live a bigger, better life. So for me, I totally agree. And I would love if my home was always the perfect place of peace, tranquility, and love. Sometimes I'm more grateful that it's the war zone, and the war is happening inside of me. I think my wife and I have both been on, I guess, spiritual paths since we were quite young, separately to each other. So our issue has been more owning our stuff rather than projecting it on the other person. And then it's like, if she over-owns her stuff, I go, oh my God, am I missing out on something? Because maybe it is me, and she does the same. So it's a balance between owning it and sharing it. But more than anything, I think it's communicating with about what's up, what's narking me, and then understanding what's really narking me, and then setting that free. So for me, I've chosen a life of a nice bit of crap, a nice bit of crap, a nice bit of goodness, more crap, more goodness. And I feel the more I want out of life, the pendulum can't swing more into goodness until it's swung a little bit more into the unknown, the dark shadow. So I claim some of that back, so it's got more of a swing into the gold shadow. And I'm not saying by any means that is the right way. That is one of many choices of how to live life. And it's the choice that I've made, because I'm a slut for this kind of thing. I want more and more. And I feel lucky that I've created safety, security, communication. And I'm stupid enough to be vulnerable enough to just like take the risk and go there. And I feel as I do, and as I talk about it, whether in the groups or in the media or whatever, it gives other people permission to live lives that are more true to themselves, whoever they are. Not to be me or their priest or their best friend, but who they are. So yeah, I need that safety in my life, and I generally have it somewhere. And I guess more than anywhere, I need it inside of me. But I need the rough stuff too, because that's what sets me free. And that's what makes me who I am.
You don't know the good from the bad until you know, how good is good until you've got some bad. You've got to have something to measure it against. So you've got to have both. But what you were saying before, Jerome, about having mentors and people around you to guide you when you first start, you need somebody who can create that safe environment where you can start to do that. The more that you start to do it, it's like any muscle. If you work it and lift weights over and over, you're going to build the muscle up. So it's a learned skill that we pick up. We've got to start out with the right people around us, ones who can guide us, get us started. As we build those muscles, we can then become the guide for other people as well. So, everybody who's been trained by a personal trainer can then come on to being a personal trainer themselves for others. That's the way society worked. It was always the boys growing into manhood, learning from the other men. Those men that are learned from becoming elders, having more skills again, passing that all the way down. So as each person goes through each stage, they then move into the next one. They now do for others what was done for them in that previous stage. And so it's really important to have those right people around us, having that environment set up.
No,
So
definitely. Definitely. And I was just going to say, going back to relationships, Kenny, was, and I know you're big on this as well, Alan, and I saw one of your posts the other day about, business ultimately at the end of the day is just another form of relationships. And what I was going to say here was that from a human performance point of view, if I've been at dinner tables where the wife has ridiculed the man for saying something quite soft or gentle, or that, don't be a wuss, pull yourself together. So what I'm saying is, if you're with a partner that's not allowing you to drop your guard, when you come home, you're in another place where you have to put up your wall for the sake of not causing an argument. And so it's understanding that, and then where does a man go if he's not getting it in the outside world, and he's not getting it in his inside world at home when he closes the front door, he's actually trapped between a rock and a hard place. And then that spirals down, and you think eventually, I mean, going back to suicide, men are committing a lot of suicide. Where's their outlets?
So many men, I've had suicidal men who have literally said, I would rather be dead than die of shame or die of embarrassment. And they have been that isolated and in their heads. I would say that so many men over the years, hundreds, have come to the men's groups because they have nowhere else to go. And some of them might come from the most magnificent families and relationships, and they've got friends and everything else, but they've got nowhere to get real. And not
Exactly.
Yeah. But also to get real where people are okay if they change. Where in so many groups, people, I like you who you are, I love our relationship. What's wrong with us? Why do you want to change? It's fine, isn't it? Well, actually, no, it's not fine. It could be better. But I don't blame these men. I think it's good management that maybe they won't allow their friendship groups or their sports groups or their families or whatever, to possibly question them and their relationships. Maybe they want to keep those as they are, which is fine, but they need a space for themselves. And, you know, I feel very lucky with the people I have in my lives. And when I'm in a men's group, that space totally belongs to me. It's nothing to do with other people's needs, what other people think, or anything else. And anything that hasn't worked in life, or I don't know how to navigate, I'll bring there to find out how other people have. But in that space, I really learn who I no longer need to be. And generally, it's the survival personalities that I will look at and think, actually, I've outgrown that. That battle is no longer happening. Therefore, I don't need the survival personality. And it's such a fine line between who I am, what's my winning formula, and who really am I behind this. And the me that I take out to different situations is different parts of me. I feel lucky that 9 times out of 10, they come from an authentic man extending. And that for me is I am, because I'm coming from my center and I'm extending from there. Where for most of my life, it was quite the opposite. It was am I. And am I was giving power to everyone and everything on the outside. And the outside will tell me who they want me to be, or at least my second guessing, who they want me to be, how I should enter and join the pecking order, who not to be, what to say, what not to say, what's appropriate. And I would never even be with people. I'd be in my head, in fear, second guessing, fantasizing, reacting to my fantasies, and being some sort of a loud knob. That's not much of a contribution, but it was the best I had.
Yeah, so in wrapping this up, what would each of you say to the men who are listening today? What sort of advice would you give them?
Can I suggest with that we live that advice? Because I like that we've talked about it, but one of the check-in round questions that I have in the men's groups is the last time I cried. And it's such a huge invitation for the men to talk about this. So I would say, ask yourself and ask the people around you when the last time they cried is. So you get an insight into yourself and other people, and there's that connection. So shall we do that round? When's the last time you two cried? Unless you want me to start.
Well,
Mike, I think I was watching, I'll go first. I think I was watching a video on someone, they bought a takeaway, and then they sat down and they shared it with a homeless person. They sat down with them and they shared it, and this person, and I think that was the last time I cried. And that was a couple of years ago. So that was the last time I cried.
No.
Yeah.
I know the term is politically incorrect, but last time I cried, I just looked at myself and thought, you big girl's blouse. I was watching a movie, and I'm a softie, always have been. You know, growing up, I kept it all in. I always had the brave face. I had more anger showing than anything else. That's how I survived. But then when I raised my 3 boys on my own, I found that being around them more than what I would have been if I had a partner there and I'd been out working and things, I started watching what they were going through, and I found that I softened a bit with that as well. So there are certain shows that I cannot watch. If there's anything about a child being abused or a rape or anything like that, I cannot watch it because I get very angry. But, you know, when I see a couple get together and they've really got it together, their families, if I'm watching a movie like that, I sit in the back. So I've got the hanky out and I'm wiping the eyes away, and that's so nobody can actually see me because I'm a blubbering fool when it comes to it. So I'm a very sentimental. Yeah. I love it when I see people that are really connecting, and that brings tears to my eyes as well.
That's great. The last time I cried outside, because sometimes I kind of feel like I'm crying inside and I really want it to come out, but I can't. I still can't let it out for some reason. But the last time I cried outside, I was with a Skype with my wife and my best friend's brother sitting next to me. And I was speaking with my best friend and his parents, and we were talking about various things. And it came to home and safety. You know, I have my bottle of water because if I feel like crying, I have a discreet sip and I'm safe. But I'll hold my water just in case I start again. And what we talked about is my best friend's mother was in concentration camp, and she was talking about what she went through as a very, very young child. Her mother gave birth in concentration camp. There was starvation and violence and things. And she was talking about that and how it's affected her life. And this is not a story. This is from very, very personal experience. And I started talking about mine. I'm going to do it in refugee camp. And she is the only person that we have met each other in that place. Because it's not a story. It's meeting in the feeling. And if someone else has felt something similar, God, that's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, that's when you really make a connection with another person, when you're remembering something that you went through that they're also going through as well. That really brings people together in a big way. And that's when we can really start to let our guards down as well.
Exactly. And to be touched there, it's like that place was under the bricks and that broke through and allowed so much more of me to be alive.
So it's like some of the conversations I've had with the different men here, and I've said how they're proud of them, proud to have actually been in their presence to hear their stories, because they've gone and told us, the deep stuff. They've actually felt safe enough to share that with me. And being connected with somebody like that, all of a sudden I see these men who may feel that, I was like this because I went through all this stuff. No, they're huger than life as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
When they open up and they connect in that way. So I really appreciate all the men that have come in and talked about their experiences around the campfire. Another reason for running is I feel great every time I'm talking to those men. I can feel their emotions and everything else, and to be invited into that and having them share it with me is one hell of a privilege.
That's the space that you hold, a space where we be with you rather than tell stories as if it's a separate thing and we're doing a performance. This is being and not doing. And for me, that is so much of what makes a good man.
Yeah. And I think the biggest gauge for the people who listen to those conversations, I would say to them, well, ask yourself, did you just hear a story, or did you connect with what they were talking about?
Yeah.
Yes.
Then if you're doing that, then you know that you're starting to open up your emotions. If you hear a story and all you can do is say, oh, that was good, that was bad, or whatever, what happened to him was horrible and all the rest. But unless you can stop for that moment and feel it, obviously you're still trying to hold yourself back as well.
Yeah.
And I think, Alan, you posed the question, what advice would you give? And I think, I'm sure we'd all agree on this, as men, we just need to talk more. We need to, if we feel we're in a bad space, we really need to reach out to someone like Kenny, like yourself, Alan, and talk, because the stories we make up in our heads are ridiculous. And just talking about it to someone else, especially a man-to-man conversation, can save so much grief. The ripple effects of something like, suicide is such a young kid on the northern beaches, died recently, and I think it was 700 people at the funeral. The ripple effect of grief doesn't stay with that person. And so to reach out and have a conversation is so important, even if it's just to say I'm lost. I'm in a really bad way. It's one of the toughest things us men can do, yet it's one of the most cathartic things I think we could ever do, because there's nothing worse than dying, especially a 15-year-old kid who's had his whole life ahead of him. He was fit, he was good looking, he was a good sports person, he was doing well at school. That character has been wiped off the face of the earth. What goes on in that mind can so be resolved with a conversation with the right people. And so quality people like you, Alan, and Kenny out there that can really help men, and the ripple effect from other families not go through this. So that would be my advice anyway.
Well, thanks very much for that. And one of the things I'd we started chatting at the very beginning of this. We've been talking for a while beforehand. We've actually been, the three of us have been on screen together before, and it's like just, you guys own the show just as much as I do. So I have to apologise. I didn't introduce both of you as well. So,
my name's Alan Stevens.
Mate, you've never looked better.
I've just come back from the Caribbean.
Thank you. Well, for everybody who, I'm going to put their names up there. You've probably heard Kenny Mammarella-D'Cruz talking before to my side, and or the other side if I don't know my left from my right. And down beneath both of us there is Jerome Lamarque from Sydney. So, guys, thanks very much for being on here today. The challenge that you put forward to us to talk about when was the last time we cried, I'd like to extend that to everybody who's watching this as well. In the comments field, put down, when was the last time you cried? If you're willing to put that in, as I said, this is a safe place. We can actually get together and have a chat. If you'd like to speak to both Kenny and Jerome, get in touch with them as well. If you're gelled with what they've been saying, make a connection, especially if you're feeling that life's pressures are on you as well. Because it's not so much that when you tell somebody else you have a problem, you usually just duplicate it. But when you talk to somebody who understands, you then have somebody who can help you diminish the size of your problem. Yeah. And so reach out and talk to these men. But again, Kenny, Jerome, thanks very much for being on here today. And to everybody else on the campfire who's watching this, thank you for listening and being part of the project. Anyway, goodbye for now, guys.
Take it easy. Bye.